with State of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Zoom is being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be updated to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Committee members, city council members, and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the Climate Action Committee may do so during public comment and may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. So thanks everyone for being here. Carrie, could you be so kind as to cover the roll call?
Sure. Jerry Glazer.
I'm here.
Thank you. Alex Friedman. I think I see him logging in. We'll wait a second for that. Dina Allen.
Yes.
Joshua Somene.
Yes.
Kenna Lee.
We were expecting her to be absent today.
Correct. Thank you. Lisa Pierce.
Here.
Debbie Burns is, and she is traveling today. She said she'd try to make it, but she wasn't sure. I know she was at our planning commission meeting last night, but had spotted coverage. Woody Hastings.
Here.
Jasenia Garcia.
She also wrote a note saying she wouldn't make this one.
Thank you. Sunali Sifand.
Here.
Thank you. Kathy Ottinger. I know Kathy is also traveling. I got to see her grandbaby last night at the planning commission meeting. Diana Rich. I do not see Diana here. And Sarah Gurney.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Sunali, would you care to do inspiration at this point, or we could put it a little later if you like?
We can do it at half time if that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll probably do it about third time or so, but yeah, we'll get to
Okay, third time sounds good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, now we are on to review of action items from the previous meeting, which is myself. First, just to note that we did approve the proposed merger with the Zero Waste Committee in terms of receiving 1 to 2 new members from that group. That has now gone to City Council to write up for approval and presumably would kick in within the next month or so, I'm guessing. Secondly, working groups were encouraged to come up with things that grant funding or projects that funding might be used for. A certain amount of that got folded into Kenna's presentation to the City Council, which I can also recap a little later. The Energy Working Group, again, will be discussing further on the REACH code range of options today. So I'm hoping everybody got a chance to review the spreadsheet, which has been attached to the last couple of meeting agendas. And that is it for previous action items. However, for this meeting, since I usually take notes on action items and for Kenna, and Kenna is gone today, I'm asking if somebody would be able to take basic notes. We don't need actual minutes. We just need a record of anything we accomplish in this meeting or are supposed to accomplish before the next meeting. So just brief action bullets. Anybody here who could handle that so that I don't have to double team? Oh, don't all raise your hands at once now. I know it's a coveted position. Thank you, Lisa. Much appreciated. Yeah, nothing exhaustive by any means. All right, we are now on to comments from the public regarding items on the agenda. At this time, does anybody in the public wish to comment? I am not seeing any interest in that. I will accept, electronic wave hands or just general waving of hands at any time.
You want to say that again? Because all I got was broken up words.
Oh, certainly. I'm not seeing any requests for comments from the public at this time. Just pointing out that electronic hands are fine, or waving your hands around your room is also fine. Okay, moving on from that, are there any statements of conflict of interest with respect to the items on today's agenda from any committee members? No, okay, thanks for that as well. Moving on now to the next item would be the planning department report.
Thank you, Joshua. So for the planning department report, we have a couple of exciting things coming up. The gas station ordinance is scheduled for council on April 5th. So that will be great to get that done. And many of you may have seen the library sculpture is up, and that came a little bit sooner than expected, which was wonderful. Our public works department actually helped install it when the artist ran into some insurance issues, so that was really helpful and exciting to see. So definitely go by that. It's called Gray Matters, and it's by Michael McGinnis, a sculptor who also teaches at Sonoma State University. Let's see, I don't have a whole lot else to report right now, so I'm going to end there and happy to answer any questions.
Great. At this time, are there any questions or comments from the committee or even from the public on the agenda item? I'm not seeing any comments. Oh, Zeno, yes, you have something to say.
Hi, yeah. I should have maybe raised that earlier at the public comment. So I noticed that the city is moving ahead with several bicycle projects. And the city doesn't have a bicycle and pedestrian committee anymore. I think it used to have a complete street commission or committee that somehow was ended. So I feel that this group with a transportation group needs to have a little bit more input in what is going to happen with bicycle and pedestrian, since it's such a important part of climate action and bringing slower and more carbon neutral transportation mobility to the city.
All right, thank you for that comment, Zeno. Point taken and well observed. Let's see, I have hands from Sarah and Jerry as well. I'm not sure about the order, so let's just take it now.
I was, to Zeno's point, while I was on the planning commission, we recognized also that there wasn't a bicycle commission, and the role of the bicycle commission was subsumed by the planning commission before I became a planning commissioner. I will admit this, though, in the 3 years I was on the planning commission, we had one report about bicycles, and it was a very short report, so it was not very proactive. Second point I wanted to bring up, and this showed up in our energy meeting. We learned that the city's been working on putting in quick charge stations, or working on where they should be, et cetera. And that sounds great, but it shows to me that, and to the group, that there's a gap. We have a climate action committee, which plays the same kind of role without the authority that a planning commission does, of looking at things in the city that have to do with climate action. Now, since we, as Zeno just pointed out, we have a transportation group that's looking at how we do things, and electric vehicles is a large portion of that. It would seem that before staff came up with a plan and proposed it someplace, and was working on a study, et cetera, that it would have come to the Climate Action Committee and given a report just outlined saying, we're going to do this. And then we'll come back later with what we've found. So I don't know how far they are, but as far as the role of the Climate Action Committee, I continue to be frustrated because it works very much like the Community Action Committee did before, instead of being an arm of the city. And there should be better coordination with staff, with the Climate Action Committee. And the only person we do coordinate with is Carrie. So we don't necessarily get all the elements as they come by.
Thank you for that point as well, Jerry. I see what you're saying. Sarah, did you have something further to add?
Well, just a few comments on the comments. I mean, Carrie is our staff. She's our staff. She's the Planning Commission staff. And I'm not sure how much more connected we can be than that, Jerry. I wanted to, again, underline that there is the transportation group here. That working group could be interested in these responsibilities specifically. We did have a Complete Streets Committee that was put together voluntarily by the city. It's not required because we're below the threshold in population, which is either 10,000 or 14,000, but we did it voluntarily. And the committee sort of blew itself up because of strident bicycle advocacy. That's just the history. I'm not passing any judgment, but to share the history. We do have a person of the public associated with this group that is putting together a bike ped group again. That's Tor Allen. And we have an old bicycle master plan that's going to be updated, we hope, when the SCTA gets its money under the umbrella of their money, where we can get it done in a timely way and hopefully less expensively for the city. That should be coming up, I think, soon this fall, perhaps.
Right, and just in terms of coordination, we are using the Planning Commission, Jerry, a little bit more to review such projects. So we do review the capital improvement plan with the Planning Commission every year. And I know they did, Tony Bertolower, our engineering manager per se, brought them, or actually I think it was when Joe was still here, Joe and Tony brought forth the Complete Streets information and checklist for them to review, give input on, and approve. So there's been a little bit more coordination. I do agree, if there's planning projects going on, I don't know of any bicycle planning projects at this time. It's more implementation of plans like the Bodega Avenue corridor, where the bicycle lanes and the sidewalk gaps are being closed, they're now in the implementation stage.
Okay. Thanks very much, Sarah and Carrie, for feedback on the history and the process there. I would suggest, just to summarize a little bit of what's happened so far in this meeting, that there is desire on the part of the Climate Action Committee to be able to have input on such things. And if you can help us connect to departments of the city when such things are being considered, we are present and up to speed and willing to engage, and would enjoy being involved.
I just want to jump in on the comment. Carrie is our funnel. And when I lived in Sunnyvale, we had a director of environmental services, and he was the funnel. But regardless of what department was working on something that had to do with environmental issues, they would show up at the committee for a report, for input, etc. We're the voice of the community, and that's part of the role that we play. We can't play it if we don't know something's happening.
So, Woody, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just very briefly, that yes, the Transportation Committee has been discussing the bicycle issue, and Zeno has been a regular participant in that committee. So thank you, Zeno. We've also had quite a discussion about Complete Streets and working on sort of sorting out how to reinvigorate that, get really back on a good track on Complete Streets type development. And so we welcome others to join in, and happy to really sort of take responsibility on that. And Alex, chime in if you want, but we've been discussing all of these issues robustly, and so plan to continue doing that, and hopefully we'll have some proposals to bring forward in the coming weeks or months.
Great, thanks very much for that, Woody, and for your cohort as well.
This is Alex. I second that. I think the challenge for us is just knowing when we can jump into the Planning Commission meetings when there's relevant topics for whether it be, energy or transportation or whatever it is. And I think, I don't know if there's a more streamlined way, if we could get just the agendas sent to the Climate Action Committee or something like that. But I do think that obviously we'd love to be involved. So any way we can make that happen is good.
Great, thanks again for that. I'd like to observe also that, one time when we had a portion of that, when Dante from Public Works came to us with a climate-related proposal, the timeline on it was a little uncomfortably short. So in some cases, if we're chasing an agenda, it really helps if we know a little bit ahead of time. So if members want to show up at a planning commission meeting, we're able to prep, that sort of thing. So thanks again all around for your concern and efforts. Are there any more comments or questions on the planning department report subjects at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Moving on, our next item would be the city council report. I'm not sure who would care to speak from that angle.
I will defer to Councilmember Gurney.
Oh, why are you doing that? I'm glad to see you here, Diana. So I just wanted to add another comment to the comment. We're all volunteers, and truly the planning commissioners and the city council relies on the public and more interested, more motivated people like yourselves reviewing our agendas to see if there's anything that piques your interest. And certainly land use development of properties, roadways might do that. I know Mary will send out the council agenda so she can prompt everybody to look at it in a timely way. And perhaps Carrie would do that. I'm not going to volunteer Carrie, but that's one suggestion for you all to keep up to
that's
date.
very easy for me to send the planning commission agendas to
Yeah,
this
but
group
it
as
means
well.
y'all are going to have to read the agenda and then think through, is there something of interest? And not all council members have a lot of time to prompt everybody to stay involved on every issue, but we do often prompt folks when we particularly are interested in an item or know that we need support in front of the council, and the positive supportive message needs to be heard. So that said, let me just tell you, the council is still getting behind in its business. We had a meeting on March 15th, which did not conclude all of the important items we wanted here, but significantly, we got a very impressive report from Phoebe and from Kenna on the Climate Action Committee. It was very well done. And I think the council appreciates how close we actually are, how connected you all are to all the council members. That's kind of new. So let's just make it work for you all more effectively. The council did also receive a report on the informational report on the Documentary Film Festival, which is coming right up this weekend. And we had a long discussion, receipt of information as to how to expand the business improvement district. The item was for information only. It's a complicated process according to our staff, not so according to others who were present. And there wasn't a lot of interest generated because we weren't directing staff. We were simply intending to make that information available to ourselves, the public, and the business community. We had the beginnings of a discussion about our Emergency Operations Center and the ordinance related to that. That's been referred back to staff to work on further. We also, let's see, I think this was the meeting when we approved the Wildlands fire engine purchase. We did, as the evening got later, we did adopt the staff recommendation and dispatch the issue of the Morris Street bike lanes, leaving them as is for now at no additional expense. And we have partial items about the recommendations from the Committee for the Unhoused. And let's see, the discussion of our future meetings, are they going to be hybrid or in person? Those are going to roll forward. My sense is that the budget discussions having begun, that discussion having been begun is influencing a lot of conversation already, and we can't talk about it any more than that procedural comment because Diane and I are Brown acted out on that one. So more coming. We had a specially set meeting, which was a closed session. More of those to come as well. There's a lot of work.
Okay.
The only thing I'd add in is, I think you may have caught this, but that we did approve the amendments to the environmentally preferred purchasing policy, which might be of interest here.
As
That's it.
well as submitting for the ATP funding, the active transportation plan funding for bike lanes along Regal.
The
So,
grant.
yes, and
Thank you.
I think this committee knew about that, but that was approved by council.
But you see, you can understand just from my reporting, I left off the consent calendar item because we didn't talk about them. It's the juicy stuff that gets the conversation and the vote that I'm thinking of interest to you, but Diana and Carrie are just right. The ATP went through.
All right, thanks very much for the summaries on that, everyone. Just as a member of the committee, to throw one comment back to the comment on the comment, et cetera. We can certainly try to track agendas on these other commissions and departments and councils and whatnot. Sometimes by the time something has gotten onto an agenda, there's already a lot of discussion and process that has happened to it. So I would just suggest that if you all from planning and from city council are able to give us a heads up sometimes in something that is being worked on or is being discussed before it gets to kind of the point of voting, that would be great, so that some of our members have a chance to engage. Any other comments or questions with respect to council reports at this time from anyone? Okay, moving on. We're now moving on to our regular agenda. The first item here is from, we have an honored guest with us today, Emmett Hopkins from the county. He's working on climate mobilization from a county government standpoint and wanted some time to catch up with us and give us an update on perspective from there. Emmett, feel free to take it away.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm just gonna work on sharing my screen here. Oh, it looks like I'm disabled. Would somebody be able to give me screen sharing permission? And I want to say, just first of all, just thanks to everyone for your work here, and I'm really grateful for your willingness to contribute your time and energy and expertise in this role. So thank you. Let's see, I'm going to try sharing my screen again. Here we go. All right. So again, my name is Emmett Hopkins, and I'm here today to talk a bit about the local organization called Sonoma County Climate Mobilization, to share kind of an overview of what the group is up to, and also explore possible areas of collaboration and mutual support. And I'm going to keep this to between 10 and 15 minutes, my time slot. So let's see. The organization is a volunteer-driven community organization that is relatively new in the climate space in Sonoma County. Started just really at the beginning of last year, but it's made of a lot of people who have been spending a lot of their time over the past years working on climate solutions locally. So new organization, but familiar people. And it's not an incorporated 501c3, but is affiliated with a national organization that is a 501c3 called the Climate Mobilization. And I'm actually on staff with the Climate Mobilization as a locally focused climate organizer, and I also support the national work that the Climate Mobilization does. And just for a little context, the Climate Mobilization is a relatively small organization, just 9 staff spread around the country. 5 of those are part of our programs team, both on policy and organizing with local groups. But although it's small, it has pretty wide reach throughout the country and around the world through its network of different organizations and volunteers, and really kind of pioneered the use of the climate emergency declaration at the local level, and helped to spread that around the country and the world. And now the organization is shifting its focus to support climate organizing efforts on the local level to translate those emergency declarations into action. So shifting back to the local level here, I've got kind of the group's working mission statement of Sonoma County Climate Mobilization, which has not been wordsmithed or finalized, but it's the working version. And so the mission is to keep an unwavering focus on the climate emergency and build power for a county-wide transformation that creates an equitable, verdant, joyous, resilient, and decarbonized future by 2030. And so we'll talk a little bit about kind of how we're structured and what we're working on and ways that we're going about trying to do that. Let's see. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit just about how we're structured. There's a steering group that is meeting every couple weeks, every other Monday in the evening from 5 to 6. And then we've got some other teams set up. And by seeing the kind of work under these different teams, you get an idea of the type of work that we're doing. So the cultivation team, please excuse the strange icon that's a little bit unusual as far as icons go, but we've got the ear up there because the cultivation team is really about kind of listening to partners and people in the community and trying to engage people, especially people who aren't typically involved or don't see themselves as being involved in conversations around climate action. So that's one area. And that's working with partners, building coalitions, hosting listening sessions, and recruiting volunteers. And then we have the communication team, which is really centered around this idea of creating a unified message so that people working on climate action throughout the county on the numerous different organizations and campaigns that are going on can kind of all feel a part of the same project. And so, you know, a win for one is a win for all. You may not be succeeding at your immediate local campaign, but when you see success in another jurisdiction that's all tied together, you feel that momentum and positive energy. So that comes with, you know, working with the press and other outreach and building a social media presence. Then we've got our jurisdiction and policy team, which is focused really on trying to kind of create connections across jurisdictions, tracking progress on what's happening on different levels, and trying to kind of connect the different leaders, different committees such as yours with each other, and also connect volunteer campaign leaders with government officials and city staff across the county. And also just kind of serving as a resource for researching policy and providing new examples and opportunities. And then finally, the art and action team, last but not least, kind of the group responsible for bringing to life the support for climate action in terms of artwork and kind of planning different actions to bring visibility to some of these projects. So you can kind of see from these different areas that this is kind of geared towards being like a support system for a lot of the different climate work that's going on in the county and can be applied to a lot of different specific campaigns. But the group is also taking on some more direct work on campaigns and organizing in a focused area, and has decided to focus on transportation as the main area of focus for the foreseeable future. And the reason being, you know, obviously since transportation makes up a lot of our carbon emissions, but also really importantly, because one of our goals is to involve more people who haven't been involved in these conversations before. Transportation is just a really an area that's touches everybody's lives. People see it and they use it and feel it every day. And so as a way to engage with more people who don't necessarily consider themselves to be climate activists or even climate action supporters, they may see themselves as being interested in building better transportation options for their own lives. And so within that area of transportation, these are a couple, I'll just describe briefly a couple areas that we're working in. One is holding listening sessions within some specific focus groups and communities, and partnering with other organizations. So for instance, I've been meeting weekly with a different group of ladies from the Roseland neighborhood in Santa Rosa every Thursday morning for the past month, and hearing what they're facing as far as challenges of getting around, those who don't drive, those who rely on the bus, what they'd like to see improved as far as safety on their streets. And then we'll be moving from the listening into what can you do about trying to kind of enact change. The Transit Riders Union is an effort that we're a part of with partners, which is just really trying to give a voice to people who rely on transit around the county, because there's no organization specifically that is representing bus riders in particular. And this is something that has been done in various places around the country. And so we're in the process of outreaching to bus riders and partner organizations to get that going. Bikeable Santa Rosa is what you see this photo from here. And it's a quickly growing group of volunteers and volunteer leaders who are kind of coalescing around this idea of what's known as a low stress rapid implementation bike network for the city of Santa Rosa, and trying to involve people from every district and neighborhood. And then finally, I'll mention we've been advocating around fare free transit, and in particular around trying to support the county's potential use of funds from its PG&E wildfire settlement money, the Climate Resiliency Fund that was created from some of those funds. A pilot year of fare free transit for Sonoma County Transit is one of the potential projects that was proposed by county staff and has not yet been approved, but we're advocating for its approval. And so each one of these areas has potential overlap. Bikeable Santa Rosa is of course focused on Santa Rosa, but of course there are many aspects that overlap with what you're up to in Sebastopol as well. Let's see. So I'm going to just go into just kind of a little brainstorm of some potential areas of collaboration and support, and then after these next couple slides, would love to just hear any feedback or questions if we have time. So this first list of bullets are things that possibly Sonoma County Climate Mobilization could offer to Sebastopol Climate Action Committee. One is networking with other jurisdictions to identify some policy solutions, and that could be inside or outside Sonoma County. And I say that because the Climate Mobilization has on staff our kind of policy guru, and he is networked with jurisdictions all around the country and constantly researching and connecting with people, and so is available to support the work that we're doing by finding examples and other folks to network with. Another is just mobilizing support and visibility for things that you're working on here in Sebastopol. So if something that the Climate Action Committee is supporting or has put together a proposal and it's going to come before the council, for instance, we could help to try to just make sure the community is aware of that happening, so that folks who want to come out and voice support for it can show up. And then also, once you've passed the awesome policies that you're working on, we would love to help just shout it from the rooftops and make it known what you're up to, and so that hopefully your successes can spread outside of your jurisdiction. And then down below here are a few ideas of how the committee might be able to kind of support the work that we're doing. One is that we're trying to build a vision for the future of the whole county. And partly it's through these listening sessions of hearing what people's visions are. But there might be opportunity to hold Sebastopol-centered version of these kind of visioning or listening sessions. Second, there's opportunity to partner on or endorse some countywide campaigns that we're working on, to the extent that that's within kind of your purview. But so, for instance, I mentioned the Fare Free Transit, that we've got a coalition of 20 plus organizations signed on for, would be something that we would love to bring to the committee for a future consideration. And then finally, let's see if I've got another. Whoop. Okay, just sharing updates from Sebastopol. with our network, and I'll get into what I mean by that in a minute, but basically we're trying to have a streamlined way of updating across jurisdictions so people can really be aware of what's happening elsewhere. And I'll get into that through this slide, which is kind of how you individually could get involved also, maybe whether it's inside or outside your role in the committee. One is if you haven't already, I invite you to join our Slack workspace, which is an online space where people all around the county are coming together. And that's where those updates would be posted. So we're still seeking point people who would be interested in coming on to the Slack space periodically and posting jurisdictional updates of saying, hey, we've got this important thing coming up in the city of Sebastopol, or we just passed this great new ordinance and want to let you know about it. So maybe it could be replicated in other cities. And for instance, we just had, over the past few days, we had an update from town of Windsor, as well as an update from Rohnert Park point people. And it's great to just have it all coming into the common space where everyone can see it. And then, of course, if anyone would be interested or is inspired to join one of the teams that I mentioned earlier or different campaigns, we would absolutely welcome more people to be involved. And I want to just mention a couple upcoming events. We've got an art build to work on some climate related artwork in Petaluma on April 2nd, and on April 22nd, Earth Day, there's, in case you hadn't heard about it already, a mural project at the JC that's got David Solnit from down in Oakland coming up to help out with this, and it should be really exciting. And then a transit equity kind of march with Sunrise and Sonoma County Climate Mobilization afterwards. So that's what I've got. I'm not sure, hopefully I stayed within my time bounds, but I'm also going to put my email up here. And so if any of these are of interest to you, feel free to reach out afterwards. And if we have any time, I'd be happy to take questions or comments.
Great, thanks for that, Emmett. Could you maybe stop sharing your screen so that we can see each other again more easily? First, a clarifying question. There was a sort of coalition of coalitions that started meeting somewhat last year, initially organized, I thought, by Pete Gang, that also had this title, Sonoma Climate Mobilization. Is that related or is that distinct?
Yes, this is sort of the evolution of that, which was that was sort of a first round effort, and partly there was a little change in tactics. Just there were some concerns around Brown Act and convening a lot of folks in meetings together who may be on some of these different committees, and so kind of going with a different approach for kind of networking and updates.
Okay, so all right. Jerry.
So how is this different than what RCPA attempts to do?
Well, we could probably talk for a while about that, but you know, some of these things could be things that could fall under RCPA's role, but RCPA, you know, this is about kind of support and mobilizing public support for climate action, and trying to network largely other volunteer leaders or volunteer committee members such as yourselves, whereas RCPA is more about trying to create a regional approach to coordinate kind of government approaches to climate solutions. So, but not as much about building the support for those. And often one of the sticking points that you find in passing things is that there's a hesitancy to, for instance, divert funding, let's say, from more car projects to more transit or bike projects if there's not enough public support. And so one of the roles we're trying to fill is to help build that public support. I hope that
Great.
helps.
Thank you. Woody, did you have something else?
Did you call on me? I didn't hear my name.
Yes. Yeah, I did, Woody.
Popped out right when you said my name, I think. Thanks. Yeah, and I'll just concur with what Emmett's saying there. I mean, the RCPA is never going to be a community organizing entity. They're theoretically meant to sort of organize, coordinate the local governments in the county and the county itself. Climate mobilization is more of a community organizing entity that can, move and shake out there with the peeps, right? So that's what that's more all about. So really two very different roles. But my question, Emmett, is along the lines of, did y'all, I'm sure you talked about a lot of possibilities when you're, sort of hammering out what you wanted to make your campaign priorities. Did you look at some of the longer term structural changes along the lines of transit-oriented development and complete streets, things like that? They're harder nuts to crack. They're longer term. Any thoughts about why those weren't chosen, or are they in there somewhere? And I didn't really see that so much in your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I think it's something that we would like to look at as well. And at the moment, it's mainly an issue of capacity among the people who are involved, and trying to identify areas, especially where we can, like you mentioned, involve more people through organizing who haven't been involved. And so choosing areas to work in that are more easily accessible to a broader group of communities. So, but definitely development sort of patterns and planning and complete streets are definitely areas of interest that we may move into.
Great. Thank you. Okay, being mindful that we do have some other weighty items on the agenda, so I'm hoping to wrap this discussion fairly soonish. But Sonali, did you have something to add?
Yeah, thank you for coming and sharing about the work with us. I'm curious where the funding comes from. And I just want to say that I'm really excited that you brought out joyousness and art. And I'll be in contact with the project that we have going on with the committee that I'd like to see how we could collaborate on.
Wonderful, fantastic. And as far as funding goes, my position is funded through the national organization that I mentioned, and they draw their support mainly from individual donors all around the country. And there's a very small campaign budget to support like some extra expenses that we're mainly using for stipends to help people who wouldn't otherwise be able to volunteer their time to be involved in the work. But otherwise it's all volunteer driven.
Great. Okay, Emmett, thanks very much for being here. Before we move on, are there any other questions or public comments on this subject? If not, okay, thanks again. Obviously, this is just the opening of a conversation discussion. I hope everybody picked up the contact information for climate mobilization, and we'll think of them in the future and vice versa. Thanks again for joining us, Emmett.
Thank you.
All right, our next item on the agenda is an update on the climate action framework from Phoebe.
Yes, thank you, Josho. So I just have a brief update on the framework. I know we've got some other things coming up, so I'll keep it short. I'm wrapping up the sort of initial community input phase. So I wanted to give an update on activities completed since the last time I was at a committee meeting, which was a while ago now. So I had the Park Village event a couple weekends ago. We had a small but interested and engaged group come by my table. The major concern that I heard from residents there was around pollution and trash in the Laguna, which is right next to Park Village. And I sort of walked by that area myself and was really shocked by the amount of trash that's in the creek. And The sign saying that the creek is polluted and people saying they don't feel safe having their kids play near the Laguna. So that's an issue I wanted to bring to this committee. It's definitely something that's really concerning to the residents there, as well as they felt that it had a potential impact on increasing the risk of flood for their community. And then I've also been connecting more with youth in Sebastopol. I've met with environmental student groups at Summerfield, Orchard View, and West County High. So that's been really great in getting those students involved. And then the survey is still ongoing, but it's going to close at the end of the month in about a week. We've got about 110 responses so far. So if you can and want to give it one last boost, I think it's on the City of Sebastopol Facebook page. So that would be great if we could get a couple more responses before it closes. And then next steps, I'm starting to look at the responses we've gotten so far. That's been really informative. I'm working on summarizing that and then developing the goals for the sections of the framework, and also beginning to research and draft sections in that. And thanks to the transportation group and others who have sent me the materials and ideas for my research so far. If you have anything else, you know how to get in touch with me. So that's it for the framework update. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Phoebe, for all that you do. Diana.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up and make sure, Phoebe, that you and the rest of the group knows that Dante Del Prete from Public Works, upon hearing your presentation, which was the first he had heard of the situation out at Park Village, immediately got on it. And there's a plan to clean the creek in that area and to reassess the sign, which may not be necessary any longer. I can tell you that in December of 2020, when I saw that area, I know, Phoebe, what you saw was unpleasant, but in December of 2020, there was huge amounts of accumulated garbage, trash, personal belongings that were a result, unfortunately, of people residing in the Laguna de Santa Rosa. And so that was cleaned up and resulted in mounds of collected items that were then disposed of. So just to let you know, Dante's on it. It may already have been cleaned up, and he will also make sure that he connects with management at Park Village to remind them that if that situation happens again, they want to know about it right away. So thanks for sharing that condition. I just want to reassure everyone that it's being dealt with, because yeah, the creek is supposed to be beautiful. So thank you, Phoebe.
Great. Thanks for that
That's
update,
great.
Diana.
Thank you.
Great to know. All right. Any other questions or comments, including from any members of the public, on the climate action framework, this portion of the agenda? Sunai?
Well, I was just. Okay. Hi.
Okay.
I just thought, the Climate Mobilization Center sounds like a great organization to partner for our visioning sessions. That
Oh,
was
you're-
the only thing.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thanks. If there's no other comments or questions on this subject, we'll go ahead and take a few moments back to Sonali for an inspirational check-in, and this would be halftime if there's one.
Joshua, could I share my screen?
I think you should be able to.
Okay. Let me see here.
I'm not sure which screen you're sharing, Sonali, but you should be able to share either of them now.
Okay,
There we go.
sounds good. Did that come through?
Yeah, we can see it now. He might put it in presentation view.
Okay, let me see if I can present. Dun, 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 dun. Sorry, folks, technical difficulties. I can't see what you can see. What can you see?
We see your whole browser, all the tabs and.
You see the whole browser?
Yeah.
Okay, well, is it just, oops, sorry, folks. Is it just this screen?
I mean, we
You
see.
know
your
what?
tabs,
It
we see the
doesn't
thing.
matter what.
Yeah.
You can see my tabs.
Yeah.
Okay, there's nothing inappropriate.
Okay. Let's just move it on.
I wanted to share with us a book that I came across called Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta, and he's an Aboriginal man from Australia who shares wisdom from Indigenous communities across the world on thinking on ideas that he thinks can save us from our climate crisis. And he comes at it from a standpoint of often we go into Indigenous communities and look at them through hourglass windows, but seldom do we go to them and ask them what they see when they look this way. And it's a bit hard to distill the complexity of what was shared, because it's these living, breathing ideas that have so many nonlinear dimensions. And that was one of the things that I learned about from Indigenous ways. So it's hard to reduce it. But one of the simple things that came about it, I know we've probably all heard about considering for the seventh generation. But in some Aboriginal cultures, they believe that we are the seventh generation, that we are the great grandchildren, and we are our own ancestors. And I often think about how the system of having children should allow us to have forethought of what we're creating into the futures, but that doesn't seem to be working so well. So introducing this idea that we are the ones who are going to inherit what we leave behind might help us in reshaping that perspective. Another thing that came about from it is the idea of collective capital and how a lot of Indigenous societies feel that they have diversity and just these extended family models that Asian communities in particular have of communal property ownership, and that he points out doesn't exist in the Anglosphere. So there's no individual controlling or owning it all in these units, which gives us like not all our eggs are in one basket, and there's just permanent intergenerational estates. And then another thing that came out from it is what I mentioned earlier of non-linear thinking. This idea of lineality that came from Aristotle, of a beginning, a middle, and an end, which leads to like an idea of infinite growth. That was something I experienced, and having somebody from the Small Business Administration recently counsel me on a business endeavor, and they were really instilling in me this idea of perpetual growth and how to just reform some of those ideas into like success and wealth being vibrancy and biodiversity and just our relationships with each other. And then lastly, what was the last thing? Oh, being in relationship to place. How the land and the air and the plants and the animals of a particular place, being in relationship with them can inform our wisdom, can inform ways of being beyond just our human relationships. So if you're interested, I would suggest like checking out his work. He has a lot of beautiful wisdom, and it comes through storytelling. So it's a lot deeper than these few little points. But thank you for letting me share.
Great. Thanks so much, Denali, for bringing that to us. All right. In the interests of our agenda, can you unshare your screen, please? Great. I'm going to move us ahead to our next and weightiest agenda item, which is the discussion of the work code, the REACH code spectrum of possibilities. This is being coordinated by the Energy Working Group. Whoever wants to speak up from that point, and I hope everybody was able to review the handout that was provided.
And I'll be speaking to it, and I hope Steve takes himself off of mute so that he too can jump in whenever. Put my glasses on so I can read the small print. Steve did this spreadsheet, which is, I thought, was really good summary of what we discovered through our study work. And we're presenting it to you so you can think about what direction should we go. So these are the different options, and I assume everybody's read through these, but I'll go through them fairly quickly. And one of the options is status quo. One of the things that we learned talking with Steve Brown in the building department was that we today require buildings to satisfy first Cal Green and Tier 1. Now, part of that is that in order to enforce Tier 1, you have to have in your code, municipal code, that you've adopted Cal Green and that you've adopted Tier 1. In 2019, we removed from our code that we adopt Cal Green. So there's no mention in our code about that. Now, that's not necessary because Cal Green actually is required throughout the state, but it is the one standard that we have. Tier 1 is substantially higher than that. So one thing is do nothing, in which case Steve will keep doing what he's doing, but it's not enforceable. And if somebody says, I don't like that, they don't have to do it. The second is follow the state mandated requirements. And that would say, okay, we're going to go back to where we were before, which is less than what we're doing right now, and which we legally can enforce. Steve, correct me if I get any of this wrong as I'm going through, okay? Next was code cleanup. There were 2 points on this, and in reading through our code and looking at Cal Green and looking at the practices that we actually follow in the city, this would be to look at our code and take everything which has to do with energy and green building and put them into the building code, into chapter 15 of our municipal code. Today, having worked on the zoning, I know that many elements that in other cities would be found in their green building code or in their energy code, we have in our zoning. And I'm sure there's other places that we'll find bits and pieces in different places in our code. So this would say, examine our code, consolidate those things. We'll see if we look at a number of other cities, they actually have sections within their building code called the Green Building Code. So it would be a title. And another one called the Energy Code. Next is, in doing that, adopt Cal Green Tier 1 so that the practices that Steve is following, we could actually enforce. Now, Cal Green Tier 1 requires much more efficient building, and it includes part of the energy bits. The Title 24, Cal Green is part of Title 24. Cal Green is chapter, I hope I get this right, is part 11. And the Energy Code is part 6. And so they're in 2 separate places, but both of those are required at the state level. So we would have to adopt that. We'd have to have an ordinance that would then modify our municipal code saying we've adopted Cal Green and Tier 1. And at that point, what we're doing today would be enforceable. The next option is we can use all electric favored REACH code. This is an interesting thing. We read this one and we presented it to you from Santa Rosa. And that one says, okay, we've adopted Cal Green and tier 1. But if you don't want to do tier 1, you can do the required for the state standard and all electric. Well, it turns out if you do the required and all electric, quite frankly, it's less expensive from a construction point of view than it is to do tier 1. Tier 2, just to inform you, and we don't have that, I don't think we have that here. A tier 2 is tier 1 plus all electric. Tier 1 reduces the building impact by about 50%. When you go to tier 2, you're net zero. So your building produces as much energy as it consumes. So it includes the capture of the energy and storage of the energy, and it's all electric. The next option is that we could go ahead and have an all electric reach code. And as we explained to you in the previous presentation that we did, we can do that with the California standard and then say we're all electric. But at that point, we need to file with the CEC. So there's quite a bit of paperwork. If you look on the right-hand side of the spreadsheet, it gives you an idea of how long it would take for some of these things to be done. And you can equate that to some staff time or some expenses. And the last one is we could ban natural gas. And that one, with the research we've done, accomplishes the all electric without having to go to the CEC. But the downside is this. Then you have to prove why you've banned gas. And you have to show that it's a health risk or something else, which the city is allowed to do. And it wasn't clear whether we can do that unless we're a charter city. That might be an issue for us. Steve, you want to jump in at all?
One point is on our existing solar ordinances for both residential and commercial. Those are, in essence, reach codes. They go beyond the state energy code. And the city never went through the process to get the California Energy Commission approval for those reach codes. So in essence, those also could be challenged if someone really wanted to push the issue.
Yeah, and when you mention that, I should also point out the zoning ordinances that we have that talk about multifamily and the number of charge stations or electric connections also could be challenged because we didn't have those approved, and they do have to do with energy. And they are also a reach code. So a lot of it is, we can find ourselves in court with somebody saying, hey, you can't do that. And then we'd have to prove that, well, okay, that's really not energy and we didn't have to go through that process, et cetera. So other questions? I went through that really fast.
Gary, just saw a question from Kenna in the chat wondering about tier 2 and if that was on the table or if you all had ruled it out.
We didn't rule it out, but tier 2 basically is net zero. So when you read about tier 2, that ends up being all electric, and you have to have solar, and we have to have that now also for some of the new buildings. But it actually ends up being twice as effective as tier 1. So yeah, we dismissed it. There's another reason for much of this too. Cal Green and basically Title 24, many of the elements get revised every 3 years by requirement. And so therefore anything that we do that is beyond Cal Green would have to be revised and resubmitted every 3 years. If we adopt tier 1 or tier 2, that's fine. We can adopt tier 1 or tier 2. That path is free and we don't have to file anything basically to do those things. But the tier 2 would be, I don't know of anybody who has adopted tier 2, to be honest. And Steve, did you run across anybody?
No, I've just seen references that it hasn't really been adopted
Yeah.
by very many cities, but I'm not sure which ones.
Woody, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thanks. So you said if we were to just go ahead and Sebastopol were to go ahead and ban fossil gas outright, that the city would need to prove this or that, health impact or something. Is that necessarily the case, or is that only the case if it's challenged?
No, that's the basis for doing it. The basis, what other cities have done is their basis is we're responsible for health in our community. And so we have banned this. It's like the nuclear bans as well.
I got it. But that's easy to do because there are known and substantiated health impacts from indoor air pollution from indoor combustion, and then we also have the climate crisis to point to. So I don't think that's a huge problem. So I would just say we should just ban fossil gas. Period. That's my vote.
But the other thing is, if we did do that, I mean, the all electric also does that. But if we did do that, then we would have to file with the CEC if we did it for a condition other than health.
Sunali, your hand is still up. Is that from before? Or do you have another comment? Okay, thanks. Just one comment for the committee as a whole. The subject of REACH codes did come up in the last city council meeting in reference to the Climate Action Committee report. And Mayor Patrick Slater did observe that adopting REACH codes would, legally speaking, be a, quote, heavy lift. So significant staff time and effort on the city part. Obviously, that's an open discussion as far as we're concerned. And also there's the observation that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, that all of these would apply just to new construction, correct?
All of these will apply to new construction. In the case of commercial and some of the others, there's some renovation triggers as well, but they're actually in the standard code as well. You'll see also, Joshua, on the right-hand side, we acknowledge that by looking at the estimated time frame. It's someplace between 6 months and 12 months before they'd be in place. The other thing I should mention, and Phoebe, I'll get you in a second, is that when I said every 3 years, the new code is about to be voted on in June. And so that will be the code that we'll live with for Title 24 and Cal Green. And that's going to include a lot of things. One of the things that is likely to include will be this. If you build a new building or you do a major renovation and you want to put in gas appliances, you're allowed to. But you have to put in a panel which is large enough, and you have to run the wires, and you have to put all the connections next to where the appliances are going for electric. So you're going to incur twice the cost, which basically will motivate people to go all electric. Phoebe, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I have a couple comments to add. Yeah, on the time frame, the new code is expected to be in place in September, October, I believe.
Yeah, no,
So,
the way it works is they have the vote in June, and
right.
then they will publish it, and then you have until the beginning of the next year to start complying. And if we wanted to do something, we'd have to, the reason they do that in a delay is that everybody has to now update all of their ordinances. And so you need 6 months to do that.
Right. So we'd be looking at updating the energy code around late fall of this year. And that would be the easiest time to adopt a REACH code because it's only one code change. It would happen all at once. However, there is no restrictions on when you can adopt a REACH code. So if we didn't come to a consensus on it before the new code is released, we have to adopt that. We could still adopt it at a later date.
Right. But if you had a REACH code already and you didn't adopt something before that point in time, what you had adopted before would become no longer in force.
Right. Yeah, the REACH codes have to be adopted every code cycle. And then just a comment about community engagement. So far on the survey responses I've gotten, the lowest ranked option for actions people think we should take is switching to all electric buildings. And so to me, that indicates that there's a a lack of understanding about what this means and why it's a needed transition to reduce our emissions, since 25% of Sebastopol's emissions come from buildings. And so I think somewhere in this energy code options, there needs to be some plan built in to educate the community and inform them about why this is needed and what it would mean for them. And then also, we've talked about a little bit the need to think about existing buildings, since there's not a whole lot of new construction happening in Sebastopol. And well, I'll just say that I support Woody in the natural gas ban. I feel that that's the simplest solution, although potentially doesn't address everything. And there are some other larger cities that are already dealing with those legal challenges, and it's likely that it's going to be sorted out with them rather than Sebastopol, is my perspective.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you that that's the case, and let them spend their money on it. The same thing happened with plastic bags, with polystyrene containers from restaurants, etc. I was with a larger community where we felt like we could do it, and we got sued. Now, luckily, before we went to court, it was decided at the state level. Woody, jump in again.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, Phoebe was just saying there about the needed education, because at my climate center work, there was just another or a recent report where they surveyed people about natural gas and found that, a lot of people simply don't even understand that it is a fossil, that it's fossil gas.
Yeah.
Calling it fossil gas forever. Natural gas has always been sort of a euphemism for it. We should all be calling it fossil gas and start educating folks that, hey, this is a fossil fuel and it's part of the climate problem, and they don't make that connection. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, well, and one of the big problems is Sonoma Transit with their buses that say clean natural gas. There's nothing clean about natural gas. And the most recent reports, studies now show that when you turn off your burners in your home, that gas is still going in your building. It doesn't stop. So a large amount of the leakage that's occurring is actually the appliances inside of people's buildings. One of the other parts, and you're right about the education, the whole thing on cooking, for instance, people, inductive ranges are really expensive. So I bought two. They were $69 a piece, besides the other one we have. So when power goes out, we use I don't have my oven and range on my backup battery, but on my 110, I plug in my inductive range, which is, like I said, Amazon, $69. Steve, jump in.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the mandating that we have no natural gas in buildings, kind of the Berkeley and Petaluma model. And Berkeley was sued by the California Restaurant Association. They did win that suit. I believe it will be up for appeal. I don't think Petaluma has been sued on it, but
Berkeley won, or the Restaurant Association won?
Berkeley did win against the Restaurant Association. And Santa Rosa was sued on their all-electric reach. They did win also. But it does point out that we do open up our small city to potential legal costs around pushing the envelope when we have very little money to do that pushing.
I also make the point, there's been articles now recently of a number of cities addressing what Phoebe brought up, of looking at how do I take care of the existing buildings, because we're not the only place where, the major problem is going to be the buildings which are built out already. And a lot of that needs to be addressed, and it's going to be likely not going to be addressed by regulation. It's going to be addressed by motivation and incentivizing. And certainly as natural gas prices go up, it's going to be, they'll be there too. And they will go up.
Well, I want to offer thanks on all our behalf to the Energy Working Group for researching this so thoroughly and making this summary. And it's a tremendous amount of really useful perspective and information. meeting wise, I'm noticing that we have 15 minutes left in our time. So I'm wondering if we're trying to get to a decision or a recommendation today, or
So
if
yes,
we're
yes,
sort of in a
that's and the reason it came back again is it's great for us to do the study work and educate everybody. But then the question is, where do we go with it, and what would we recommend to the city council? If you guys want to know what Steve and I would recommend, we'll let you know. But Zeno, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I just want to reinforce what you said, and it was said before, that this affects a minuscule part of building, maybe 3% or even less, and so it will take 50 years maybe to get this going. And I'm using this approach of a zoning of a change in the code, and so I think we should be aware of that and think about this simultaneously with the existing building. It's not a separate thing, it's the bigger part of the problem. We have an emergency with like a time deadline, and we need to understand that we need to use activation of the community, and maybe we have this thing that the city initiated about saving water, where they really reduce the transaction cost for people to do the right thing. And the city, as if we make a change, we should have a vigorous program to that the city kind of leads to convert existing residences and commercial buildings in the spirit of our zoning or our code change.
Mm-hmm. Woody?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to put a motion on the floor that we recommend to the city council that they adopt a permanent ban, prohibition on on fossil gas in new construction.
Is Joshua, you're running the meeting. You looking for a second?
I would suggest that we hold that thought for a moment, because that opens up a new wing. Jerry, you had sort of asked for essentially people's positions on the range of options here. I'm wondering if before we take up the gas ban subject, we could do a quick round, and people, if you have an opinion on what level to approach here, you just sort of offer that, and we take just a very quick poll on to see where people stand, and then maybe a further motion will.
That's a great suggestion. I like that. And
okay,
that is where we were hoping it would go. Yeah.
Great. So just a quick round for my purposes as a member of the committee. I think adopting CalGreen Tier 1 makes great sense. The natural gas ban, I think, is worth discussing too, but is a somewhat separate issue from Reach Code.
Okay. You want to call on people?
Sure.
Who do you want to call on next?
Oh, let's see. Woody, you have an opinion on the natural gas. What about the Reach Code?
Well, I mean, if maybe I'm not understanding this, if we were to have prohibition, why would you still need the Reach Code?
Well, the gas ban is not the only subject involved, right? There's all this building construction standards that's also involved, which is also inside the Reach Code. So CalGreen covers a lot more than just the gas issue. So
yeah.
Well, CalGreen actually doesn't cover the gas issue at all, but you know.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion.
Diana?
Yeah, I'd love to. We do have a staff member here with Carrie. I'm wondering if maybe we could get her perspective on this issue and whether there's some problematic pieces that the Climate Action Committee should be aware of.
You know, let me suggest something. I'd like to hear from everybody before we hear from staff on the problems, because we've done this with Steve as well. So we know a lot of the problems, but I wanted to get a sense of what people thought just from what happens. And then I think let's go back and do it again.
Okay, then I would request that we not take, I understand what you're saying, Jerry. Joshua, I'd take direction from you as the lead here and ask that we not leap into a motion and a second and a vote until we have the benefit of everyone's input, and that would include Carrie Svanstrom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yeah, Diana just said what I was thinking too. I'd really also like to hear from Jerry and Steve about, given all the research that they did, they learned a lot about it, about the pros and cons of all these different approaches. And I'd really think we need to hear what they kind of came away with as their opinions. One more piece that we still don't really know about is the charter city issue, which if I'm not misunderstanding, might prevent us from a natural gas ban if we were not a charter city. But I guess that's a little unclear still. All right, thanks.
Well, if you want us to do that, Steve and I are prepared and we discussed it, so.
Correct. The floor is yours.
You want us? Okay.
Sure.
So I think for both Steve and I, we were surprised where we landed because both of us were thinking all electric, reach code, that was the main focus. After all the study work, I think we're both agreeing that we formally adopt in our code Cal Green Tier 1, and that we examine our code and find everything that has to do with green building and energy and consolidate them into, I always forget what's a chapter and what's a title, but I think it's chapter 15 of our municipal code, which is the building code. And so 15.40 and 15.41 becoming the green building code, and 41 becoming the energy code, and we examine our code. The reason for that, and the reason for the code portion is this: for people building and even the planning commission, whoever else, when you're looking at things, it'd be nice to find it in one place instead of having to read through hundreds of pages and figure out who thought about what part. So we can focus that stuff really quickly. And that required the least amount of work with the city. It makes it easiest for the building department because Steve's already doing something well beyond what most cities do. And I can tell because he keeps examining my ADU. So I think that's where we both ended. Steve, do you want to say anything different than that, or is?
No, I think we're in agreement. We build around 12 houses a year on average in Sebastopol. So we also see that the state will most likely be coming in the next go round in 2026
Yeah.
with an all electric mandated code.
Yeah.
That, that's not 100% sure, but indications are leaning that way.
And the reason they haven't so far, there's two conditions, where there's only really one condition. You have to prove cost effectiveness. They've already proven cost effectiveness on all electric. What they don't have is enough cities that have already specified all electric. And Steve Brown's point to us was, nobody really gives a shit. I'm sorry, we're recording what Sebastopol does, but they do care about San Francisco and Los Angeles and several other large cities. And once they do, then Cal Green will be all electric. So we're within 3 years of that anyway. I think that's really the case.
On a facilitation front, just to observe that we have about 5 minutes left. My sense is that we're not going to quite get to a resolution on these subjects today, and I apologize that we didn't have more time to dig into this weighty matter. I would suggest that we take this up again the next time around with the goal early on in the agenda to get to some form of recommendation with respect to it. So if perhaps people could focus in the next few minutes, if you have additional comments or opinions or preferences on this subject, as opposed to more tangential discussion items, it would be great if we could sort of continue that show of hands or voices with respect to what would be preferable.
Well, there's two things, Joshua. I would like to hear what Carrie has to say. Second is, I'm not sure I'll make the next meeting because I'm going to be flying around the country for 3 weeks, and I don't know where I'll be landing.
Okay. Carrie.
So just a couple of thoughts. I think Steve and Jerry have done an amazing job of putting all this information together and really laying out the issues. You know, there's a lot of trends right now, and yeah, the city could go one way or another. Some have risk, but they also have the benefits, potential benefit with them. You know, a couple of concerns that I think about is energy reliability and the fact that PG&E, and I know this is something Energy Group is working on, won't allow microgrids cross boundaries, and we don't control. I mean, they turned off our power for a week and didn't turn it back on. They could have, but they didn't. And so, you know, what is the electrical grid responsibility and all of that? No, I think that some of that's manageable, and a lot of that's just policy stuff that needs up the chain to get straightened out, because there's no reason PG&E couldn't do a lot of the things that that they're not doing. So I'll jump on Mike McGuire's bandwagon there. The other piece of it is, yeah, we have a 3,500 or so structures in the city that are existing. What can we do to make sure that those existing structures are moving forward? There are so many ways. I mean, I moved into a fixer that was still designed as supposed to be as a passive house, but you know, the energy you don't use is the cheapest, most sustainable energy you can get. So yeah, I got the solar panels and the battery, but I didn't do that before I swapped out every single light to LED and super insulated my attic, my crawl space, and every wall I could get to. All of those things are in our existing housing stock. You know, we got to find a way around and how we can help people improve those. That would make just a huge difference. And I know that's sort of maybe I'll get off my soapbox on that, but I think there needs to be some way of addressing existing construction and helping people move in that direction.
Point taken. Several people have made that point. I think we're in agreement with it. With respect to the REACH code subject, does anyone have more that needs to be said at this time, or can we pick up this discussion again in the future? We okay? Okay. So thanks again very much to the Energy Working Group. I'm not meaning to shut this subject off. It's just that there's obviously more than we're going to be able to accomplish in our next few minutes, and I'm trying to respect people's time. On a chair front, our next committee meeting is not in 2 weeks, but is in 3 weeks on April the 13th, because March is a 5 Wednesday month. So we have a little bit of break time in there. If the Energy Group wishes to take up this discussion again and try to get it more towards a resolution next time, please just let us know within 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from today would be agenda confirmation for the meeting 3 weeks from today. And we'll try to check back in that second week and see if we want to take this up at the next meeting or at the meeting following. Either one of those is fine. I don't see that we're on an emergency time frame. I also want to highlight the subject of the natural gas ban, which is in a sense a separate discussion thread from an energy code issue, but no less valid and equally worthy of discussion. So we may perhaps have a discussion on that and that proposed motion in tandem with the sort of the energy code for new building construction discussion.
That's actually a good point. It's worth studying, and it is a separate study.
Thank you. So let's see. We also had working group reports. I will punt on the compost event. We had a great one. We're going to have another great one. We'll tell you about it next time. In the last few minutes that we have, does anybody have other sort of working group reports or upcoming agenda items to be considered? Lisa.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind people to please be putting together their priorities list, where the funding committee is working on trying to gather that. The energy committee is already kind of well underway on it, but haven't heard from other committees yet. So just a reminder about that.
Thank you. I also want to put forth a reminder to folks that about Phoebe's survey on the climate framework, and that we could use more responses. So if you have any way to promote that to your lists or groups in the next week or so, would be prime time to do that. And Zaino, do you have comment on focus subjects?
Yeah, so I'm noting that the Climate Action Advisory Committee of the Regional Climate Protection Authority is meeting early April before our next meeting. So I would suggest that I'm a representative of Sebastopol, and maybe Yosh, you are too.
I am a representative and I will be there.
Yeah, and so we need some, we could have a report on what is happening there next time.
Okay, good point. All right, we are at 5:01 p.m. by my clock, but if there are any final comments or points to be made, I'm still open. Thanks everybody for being here and getting through all these subjects of merit and import and weight and chewiness. And let us get back to it again in 3 weeks. Meanwhile, it's a great time to check back in with your working groups and whatever irons you may have on the side of the fire or vice versa. And yeah, thanks again. I think we are done for today with your permission.